Hi, Kara. Good morning, afternoon, evening.
Hello, how are you doing?
Very good.
Morning. How are you, Kira?
Very okay. Thank you for joining us. Well, let's just jump straight in. Kira, how is the world where you are right now?
Yeah, so today we've got like a really extensive shelling.
Is that my computer?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, it's a really extensive shelling at night, and we had another parliamentary meeting that we gathered again in secrecy, but now we are all experienced spies and etc. You know to wear like a different kind of clothing that you're wearing when you're a member of parliament, and like just to get there, and then to get there in secrecy, you hang around the city, and then when there is a time, everybody is getting in. You then spend again 10 minutes pushing your buttons, fulfilling your duty, and then you're just going away. And so it's not taped, so we allow ourselves like a little bit more than usually, in all those being nice and decent parliamentary members. So the head of the parliament was saying today, thank you everybody, and now get the hell out of here fast. Because so the shelling is really hard. So we've got one of the subway stations today destroyed from like the top side. It's like right near where I am, and it was loud.
And you're still in Kiev.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
I can show you my cat as a proof. So no, it's actually after all the intelligence information that we've got, we decided to put the city on a curfew for 2 days, and this is happening right now. So like in 2 hours, the curfew starts, so nobody is going out for 2 days. It should be enough for the army first to bring in them, like the first warrior, the first apocalyptic prince or whatever it's called, like the heavy weaponry inside the city. And second, what we need is to make sure that people are not on the streets, because there is right now like about up to 10,000 Russians who are inside the city, but they are like sitting quiet. So I don't know if these numbers are correct, but this is so the military will try and get them. Wow. And the shelling continued, and from what we know, the political decision about trying an attempt to take Kiev has been made. Again, nobody knows yet. We can only operate with the information that we've got. So this is the information that we've got. So right now waiting for the resistance team to come back with more food. And we will be sitting tight. They probably will be patrolling, and I will be doing my propaganda thing. Yeah.
Now let's thank you for the update. Let's talk about the propaganda thing. I just keep going back to that image of you in front of the tower, the TV tower that the Russians were trying to bring down. It's just an incredibly symbolic representation of the fight for the narrative, the fight for the conversation. And, thus far, it's remained a relatively black and white conversation around the world. There's some amount of people that are not fully paying attention. There are still some threats of some subversive global narratives that we all hear echoes, and that's, I think, the scariest thing in many ways in the global conversation, is that there might be a new current of there could be a current of counter narrative. And I think that that's what we're wanting to talk about and work on as much as we can today. Chris is here as one of the most influential mythologists and story experts in Hollywood history, one of the most influential mentors for storytellers and narrative designers that there's ever been. And I hope that he'll help us today and just extend the call to those who are shaping narrative and participating in the narrative to continue and to further that work with you, Kira. And I want to hear more about what is important to you in the narrative. And I hope that we can hear some. Chris, thank you for joining us. And I'd love to hear your just initial thoughts about what's going on.
Yes, well, this is something that I think, on top of everything else that was already going in the world, it is something that's just extremely difficult for people to process, whether you're there on the ground and can't believe the reality of what's happening right in front of you, or whether you're far away, and I'm a student of history and I like to play computer games, and I have a collection of toy soldiers and so forth. That's all wonderful as mind games, but this is real and it's very difficult from two different points of view. One is this counter narrative that you're talking about, which is poisonous and toxic and powerful and needs to be kind of aggressively stood up to and, firmly put back. But there's another side, which is which I've encountered personally, which is just a flat out denial of the whole picture. Not that I don't want to listen to your side or the other side. I don't want to know about it at all. I went to a dinner party the other night, and as soon as this subject came up, I was basically at the party to hear what other people thought about it, because I'm trying to make a picture of the world. And I do this every morning reading the papers. And when something like this happens, I go to history and I go to experts and I try to make a picture. The people at the party did not want to make any picture. They wanted to go on as if none of this was happening. And they wanted to talk about the wine and the cheese and the crackers. And I just found myself withdrawing from the social scene there, because it's to me, it's so irrelevant. It's some kind of river that goes on all the time. But hey, folks, this is as real as it gets. I think it's kind of trivial in a way, but interesting. Is one of these games that I play obsessively is a computer war game called Cossacks, and it was actually designed in the Ukraine by wonderful Ukrainian engineers, software people. And
those are your people, Kira.
Yes.
I'm super proud.
And they're very good.
For those who don't know, Kira, also before joining the parliament, was one of the leaders in the tech world in Ukraine and helped assemble the teams that would become Ring, that sold to Amazon and others. So just want to make sure everybody knows, that background about Kira as well. Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's wonderful. We'll be mixing it up today. I think just this is the nature of the times we're in. But in this game, I often am playing in sort of the Russian position. I don't play as Russian, but I will build up my forces. I'll surround a weaker enemy, and I'll then start knocking out all of the defenses and so forth. And the reality that the game does portray is the damage to the civilians, because you cannot destroy all of the infrastructure and all of the defensive armies and cannons and so forth without killing everybody. And by the time you've run over the whole country and knocked out those strategic places, all the residents are dead. So this is a chilling kind of view I have of it, and as I say, it's kind of trivial and silly in a way, but it rocks me a little.
But what it makes us think about is, obviously the president was played a president. We've all talked about it on TV before he was the president, and I think it's meta on meta on meta about the way that narrative models our reality, the way that narrative becomes reality. It is so important, and that's exactly what we're here talking about today. And so here, listening to you talk about this blurry line between how we think about games and how we think about the world. It's exactly, maybe it sounds silly, but I think that's exactly that's what Jung fought really hard for people to realize, is that fantasy is reality. Everything that's real is fantasy first. Good morning, John.
Morning, John.
Morning. Sorry, I'm late.
No problem at all. We're just getting started, and I was actually about to ask Marissa if she wants to begin with any opening thoughts. Before I do, I wonder, John, would you help us introduce Marissa?
Yes, I've known Marissa for many years.
and she is a Circassian from Jordan, if I'm not right. Yes.
Yep.
And she holds a degree from Harvard and a degree from Georgetown as well, and is director of Middle East program at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. So I thought she could give us some profound insights into the reaction of the Arabic and perhaps Iranian community as well, although I've been dealing with Iranians over this atrocious war.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you, Will. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about what the narrative is from in the particularly in the Arab region of MENA, and then I can touch upon a little bit Iran and a little bit on Israel. I think it's fascinating to me just to go on the news and check different news outlets in Arabic, whether it's Al Jazeera or Al Arabiya, which are pretty much the most predominant and most watched networks in the region, to see how the framing of the war, the Russian war on Ukraine, is done. And there is a difference, and that reflects basically where these governments stand, because the initial sort of reaction from many of the Arab governments when in the lead up to the invasion was one of wait and watch. There's a lot there to consider. The Arab region has traditionally been a theater for great power competition, and as the U.S. Slowly disengaged from being more proactive in the region, you saw more Russian influence spreading. It's not surprising that Russia today has an Arabic channel, which may not have the same audience, but people do tune in, and correspondents in the region who work for Russia today also get to present a different view. Now, zooming in back to where I started actually this morning, I checked Al Jazeera and I checked Al Arabiya first before looking at other news outlets. And Al Arabiya framed it as Russia's military intervention in Ukraine. It was not a war, and it was not Russian aggression. It was simply a military operation. Operation.
These are these narrative keywords. Yeah, please.
100%. This is how it is framed. And then you have the more sort of, official sub-headlines that are carried through from Reuters and AP. So, but the general framing is that it is a military operation. It's not a war. And then you go to Al Jazeera, and the headline says it's a war. And so that this is Russia's war in the Ukraine, which is very different. And when I had dug a little bit deeper to see, well, what happened really 2 weeks ago at the UN General Assembly when we had these votes, and many of the Arab countries had voted for the resolution, with a few exceptions, who had abstained. The resolution was co-sponsored by Qatar, Kuwait, two countries who had fought earlier the week before to ensure that Ukraine's sovereignty and independence were part of the statement that came out of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Those who had resisted and in the end pretty much won the day with a more bland sort of neutral statement were countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and we know where they stand, particularly because of the oil factor. Both leaders of both countries have reportedly refused to receive calls from President Biden, even though they are considered key U.S. allies in the region. And so it's.
But there's an oil story here too. Beneath this, who supports who also has to do with the oil narrative.
Yeah, I think the last point I want to make here in terms of sort of the narrative and perceptions, because perceptions matter hugely, as we know, when all of these factor in on the global stage. In the region, a most recent survey that was conducted in 50 cities around the Arab world that included youth, people or young people who see Russia as an ally is around 70%. Those who see America as an ally, yes, that was my reaction to it. Those who see America as an ally are about 46 to 50%. Those who see Russia as an enemy are just about 23%, under a quarter. And so this tells you a lot about how Russia is seen in the region, even though when you look at engagement, right, when you look at the country that gives most, whose businesses are more out there, whose culture is more out there in the region, it's the United States. But it is sort of a stance to take, because the United States is the superpower representing the West. And so anything that stands to the West, stands up to the West, i.e. Putin and Russia, will be seen in a different light. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I want to comment, if I may. Thank you so much, Marisa. So first of all, in 2 hours, I'm having an interview with Al Arabiya. So, and I know that they will be I know they will start exactly with this, the conflict, and then I will be saying, not a conflict, a war, etc. And they will say, no, we don't think so, all those things. So absolutely true what you're saying. So second, we right now live in this bubble where it's very clear what is right and wrong, black and white. As a person who is giving about 18 interviews a day, I can tell you, no, it's exactly not, it's exactly the opposite. So yesterday I had a huge press conference with the Serbian, Macedonian, Croatian news, where the Serbian are dominating. They all are asking me questions, but don't you think Putin is right? He is such a good person, because there is look, we only killed 500 of your civilians. This is a true story, but they're saying, I'm saying, what are you talking about? They say, but this is a true leadership. It's 15,000 of Russian soldiers died on your soil, and only 500 of your civilians were killed. This is how good is he. This is how, and many other crazy things that sound surrealistic. You don't know what to answer to that, at the very beginning. Then you learn and just yell at them. But I mean that at some point, we need to realize that they are pouring tons of money. I can tell you, tons of money onto everybody who can accept it, including German media, Serbian media, French media, Australian, etc., etc. Whoever takes it, just go. And I'm sure Al Arabiya is also benefiting from being friends with Russians.
So
and
just paying for narrative.
So it's like a chicken or egg question, but for
just
the country,
paying for narrative coverage. Whoever will tell their narrative, they'll pay them to say it.
Yeah. So that's for me. I'm shutting up and giving the floor to anybody else.
Oh, sorry, I was breaking up a little bit. I did not mean to interrupt you at all. I just wanted to, make sure we all caught that takeaway, that they're literally paying for narrative, whoever will tell their narrative. And that's a huge part of the narrative war. So the framing of which words to use, who's being paid to tell what stories. One of the things that's on my mind too, Marisa, when you're talking about which countries see Russia as an enemy in the Middle East, well, many countries in the Middle East are autocratic. Is Saudi Arabia a democracy? Do they have the same? Well, this is a threat to all of our free rights. This is an invasion of our bubble of freedom. They don't have that freedom there. So I would be really interested to split that data. Jordan, for example, where there is a little bit more of a democratic reality, and Israel, I would love to know if the more democratic countries see Russia as more of a threat now that it's landed more squarely on the side of autocracy. Yeah, Kira.
Israel just voted for not letting Ukrainian refugees without visas. So take that, democratic countries.
I thought that would be one of the primary places that all the Ukrainian Jews saw a safe place to go.
Yeah, well, this is like, I'm saying, like, this is one of my friends said that in 1943, I think there was a situation when the Allies did not allow the ship with the 900 Jews who were flying.
US.
I think it was US, or like denied them. So Israel is doing the same right now. Because that would be the main place for Jewish refugees to flee. And they did it. So I cannot believe that.
Like 400,000.
Yeah, so this is like what we're expecting Israel, somebody to be alive, and then it's like not. So
Israel buys a lot of Russian military equipment.
They do, and they also have a significant
are somewhat
Russian
more
Jewish
dependent
population.
on it.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, please, yeah, please, yeah, and very interesting. John, I haven't heard. Oh, please, Chris, go ahead.
Go ahead with John. I think that's good.
Oh, I just haven't heard from John yet this morning. I wonder what your kind of thoughts are a week later from our last conversation.
Well, I think that it's tempting to see the issues that the war has foregrounded and has basically created as forming a framework for a kind of a future world or whatever. But I do think that some of the underlying strategic interests that antedate the war have been there for a century or more are still going to be there. And I think, for example, to see the U.S. as withdrawing from the Middle East is to confuse the bad judgments of the Obama administration and, of course, the ridiculous behavior of Donald Trump with American strategic interests. And I don't think Obama was particularly good at all at the international stage and juggling various local conflicts, local strains, local dynamics of whatever sort. I was, what little input I had in any of that, I sort of gave up. Because I found myself being, some of those things I was saying were being attributed to President Obama. I didn't want to do it anymore. But I think that there was a very large body of people in the security, let's call it an industry, in Washington and surroundings that were very much upset with the way Obama conducted foreign policy, particularly toward the Middle East. And I do think that, I mean, the irony to me is one that the mentality is still, and maybe Marissa was the way these surveys were framed, but the morality is still one in which an external hegemon is somehow accepted as part of the local dynamics, which strikes me fundamentally a position of weakness. And the other one is if they want to know what Russians will bring, apart from a more conservative set of values, all they have to do is talk to people like yourself who are Circassian and who are living testimony to the genocidal impulses of the Russian Empire. You were all driven out. Your nation was virtually destroyed. There's a couple of fragments left over back in the homeland area. And Gorbachev's vague impulses to allow some repatriation, they petered out under Yeltsin, if I remember correctly. So I would think that just to wake up a bit and look a little more honestly at what's at their own situation would be a very useful exercise for most of those countries to do. So anyway, I was going to.
Well, on that note, John, you know, I've got my students in philosophy class. Many of them are here with us right now. One of them is really interested. They're all interested in doing creative projects and trying to figure out how they can participate and support the narrative and do what they can do. And one of the things that they're interested in doing is capturing the generational effect of what's happening, right? So, Kira, you've spoken about how one of the saddest things for you is that the children of Ukraine will now have to grow up with this trauma in their lives, right? And that what you want for them is to not have to do that. One of my students is a third generation, 2 generations removed from leaving Ukraine after Nazi extermination of Jews in Ukraine. He's a Jewish family living in LA. And so he's an example of somebody where it took 2 generations for him to now be that kid that's growing up without that trauma. And Marissa is maybe one generation in the middle who saw it, more recently, but not as recent as Ukraine. And I think that seeing that multi-generational effect, and while at the same time also seeing that this type of invasion and this type of tyranny coming from Russian imperialism is not a new thing either, is something that is to be stood up to and to see is happening, something that's been happening for quite a long time. Marissa, what is it like for you to see people waking up today to, Putin's imperialism when it's been your reality for your whole life?
This is a really good opportunity to explain how this narrative even, whether that narrative even exists in the region, because my grandparents' generation sort of buried that story for a whole generation, because they wanted to forget what happened. The pain was so deep that they did not want to relive it, and by telling their children. But then as the community settled in their, across the diaspora, and they were welcomed and to a certain extent protected by in Jordan, at least, by, the Hashemite royal family, there was more room to express through culture, through music, through dance. And honestly, that was my first my first introduction to what happened as a child. I watched it through dance, how the Russians basically, how the Circassians and the Russians fought, and then the Circassians were expelled and then moved to modern day Jordan. And then now you see the young generation reviving the narrative, reviving what had happened, and ensuring that we are going to tell our story, and we're going to even educate our parents who knew tidbits, but not the whole story of what happened. And so it's and I know that it's the same for other communities that had suffered also over different generations. There is a tendency to sort of hold on and forget the pain, but then you see the youth wanting to do things differently, and then you have so many tools now with social media to ensure that narrative is revived.
Well, it's so interesting that you bring that up. The students that I was talking with this morning is interested in it as they are, and narrative supporting defense against Russia and that kind of thing. They're equally, maybe even more interested in helping Ukrainians. They recognize the trauma, the narratives that this is going to create for their own lives, what you're talking about years later. And so many of them are interested in helping to create time capsules and record conversations and gather materials, for that, preservation of that memory, so that when that art does come out, that it can be supported and these materials will be there. Kira, I know you're going to have to go soon. And I want to just ask you, Jason Kalinsky of Save the Cat has offered to send out a direct call from you to the Save the Cat following, which is very considerable, and they are all screenwriters as well. And we'll send it out to a few others. Instead of asking you to take the time to write a letter, I wonder if you might, in your final moments here, put out a direct request that we can clip out and send and put in front of screenwriters, a direct call from you for artists and writers to support Ukraine in this narrative conflict, however you'd like to say it. Not to put you on the spot, but I hope that you could maybe help us with something like that.
Okay, let me just think about what should be the ask right now. Should it be to support Ukraine in the narrative, or should it be support Ukraine publicly? What do you think is the most appropriate to the members of the Save the Cat?
I think that they're all, everybody listening, they're already narrative experts. So we don't need to ask them for specific ways to join the narrative. The real thing is to ask them to use their skills as narrative experts to, participate in the narrative in the way they feel morally inspired to do, which might range everything from speaking up publicly to writing a story to creating creative projects, whatever they are. whatever the thing is inspired for them as storytellers, that's what's needed. One of the things that's needed.
Okay, so who will be recording?
It's recording, yeah, anytime.
Okay, so hello, dear Save the Cat community. I'm really grateful for opportunity to be speaking to you. I am Kira Rudik, a member of Ukrainian parliament and leader of the Holos Party, and I'm talking to you from Kiev, Ukraine. It's day 20 of Ukrainian-Russia war, the war that we never wanted and that Russia imposed on us. And we continue fighting every single day. And because we continue fighting, Russia doesn't have any victory, any major or minor victory that they can be proud of. So we are standing and we know that the truth is on our side. And at some point, the victory will be on our side. And we are protecting our motherland with our blood, our lives, and all our efforts. Since the day one, we have been fighting two wars. The one is the physical war and another is informational war. As a person who is talking to people all over the world, I know that it is not black and white for everybody the way that it is for us. So I'm asking and pleading for the support, for support to tell the truth that Russia attacked us, the truth that we do need a support from the NATO allies, that we need to close our sky so we will be able to win this war, that NATO allies are not doing everything that they can, that there is more that can be done. And every single day, these decisions are not being made. Ukrainian people are dying. My people are dying. And I'm asking you to do everything possible and impossible from your side to share this information, to use your skills, to use your influence, to spread the word about what's going on in Ukraine, to call the politician that you know and ask him to vote in Congress to close the sky in Ukraine, to remember the things that we already seen 100 years ago in World War II when hesitation caused the humanity too much. I'm asking all of you and I'm pleading to you to do all of that because I know that it can make a difference and it will. Thank you so much and glory to Ukraine.
You're so inspiring, Kira.
Thank you. Thank you, Kira.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say before Kira has to go, I'm very interested in what you said about meeting resistance and these people who want to minimize everything with anger, with revealing your outrage. I think that's wonderful, and I think that's necessary now. I'm looking at it, these things through, as I always do, through a mythological lens, and we're sort of in the territory here of goddesses of justice and goddesses of vengeance for injustice, and they operate on outrage. They see something that's unfair and against the laws of God and laws of humans too, and these forces like the Furies are outraged, and this drives them to make the scales balance again, because that's what we're in, a state of extreme imbalance. So I applaud you. If you have a minute, I'd love to hear more about how you let loose your justifiable anger and outrage and use it as, not a weapon, as a tool in this discussion.
Yeah, Chris, that should be like that would be lovely separate discussion on how I usually yell at the TV channels that I don't like Al Arabiya. I just they do one mistake, they say, oh, this is not a word, it's just a conflict, then don't remember anything and so happy. I have used to live in this world of boundaries where it's like, Kira, no cursing on TV, no saying what you think, no calling, no saying bullshit, F you, all those words cannot say, be nice, be safe. Now, nobody's telling me things. My PR is saying, okay, yeah, you do your stuff. Nobody is blaming me, nobody. So I go this is my way. So Al Arabiya called should be a nice one.
Yeah, those goddesses, the Furies and Nemesis that will hunt down the evildoers are glad to feel that energy. That's correct and positive energy for this time. So let it loose.
I'm so inspired by
they asking, and I say I don't remember a thing. I just remember them saying the thing, and then the knight that has this thing on his helmet, they say like it fell down. Yeah, it fell down. Then have no idea what happened next.
Well, you're in a war, and so the weapons, the armor, the helmets, the shields, all of that stuff, we keep it on the wall in a museum most of the time. But now take it down. Take these things down, and they're your birthright, and it's perfectly appropriate right now.
And Chris, I don't know if you've John and I have been talking about this. John's a major expert on Amazons. Is responsible for the etymology that we use for Amazon.
Great.
And we've been talking about the fact that the Amazons are warriors, are probably the women warriors. One of the main inspirations of them would have been the women warriors in the Scythian military. And where the Greeks ran up against the Scythian women warriors was in the Black Sea, which is where Ukraine is. So, there are invariably memories, remnants, genes of these exact Amazon women fighting now in Ukraine. And I can't help but be inspired and project that on you, of course, Kira.
Yeah, it brings tears to our eyes when we see things like that. They just cut through all the baloney. John mentioned ironies too, and the ironies are abundant here. I was thinking, if I had to put a soundtrack onto the last 3 weeks, it would be, ironically, the Leningrad Symphony, which was composed during the worst of World War II, when Leningrad was being besieged by the Germans. And that piece of music has in it all of the terrible might of the enemy and all of their armor and their airplanes. And you hear all that in this composition. And then there's this triumphant uprising of the people that overthrows this. And, I wish the Russians would put themselves back into that state of mind and realizing they're doing to others what was done to them. And that's one of the shocker things about this, is that after going through all of that as a culture yourselves, that you could impose that on somebody else is really outrageous.
It is really war is always a game of projections. The projection of your own shadow is so much projection of America, so much. And also that's one of the biggest ways that Putin tries to fight the American narratives, by saying, what about, right? You think we're so bad, here's your shadow, and tries to compare our shadow to his, villainy. And, whether or not that's comparable is an aside. I don't think that it is comparable, and certainly not today, and certainly not with what's happening in this moment. But I do think you bring up, when it comes to working with narrative around conflict, and especially around war, there's a lot of projection going on and a lot of shadow that we all have to deal with. And actually, positive projection is where we can get ourselves to see ourselves in other people's shoes. When we hear, I have a lot of dancers. We just read about the dancers, the ballet company, the Ukrainian ballet company that just dissolved to join the effort. And these are all dancers that are my students' age, doing the same thing that they do. And that enables them to project into it at a deeper level. And Kira, I also wanted to ask you if you might be willing to put us in touch with anybody who can help us get in touch with young artists in Ukraine that my students could interview and talk with. Do you have anywhere we could start?
Yes, I already sent some invites, but you understand this, so they are either somewhere right now or a part of the resistance. So I'm just waiting for a reply. I will get back to you with that nearest days. Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time for that.
Sure.
Kira, I know we normally only have you for half an hour and it's been 40 minutes and you've got another big interview coming up. Do you have any final thoughts for us before you go?
Well, only that I believe that in 20 days of war, people get tired of it. And especially if it's not the war that is like next door. And this is another challenge that I'm seeing already, that we're getting less interviews. And it's like it's just like, okay, how many people died? And this is also a challenge, because it's always happens with tragedy. At some point, people get tired of it. And one of the things that usually help with keeping it up is showing some hope, is saying, yeah, we see that we are going to win soon. We have like intelligence reports. And we are going to win soon. And they say, oh, really? How do you think that? And this is like another thing that we are doing, saying we have reports that we are taking in the EU soon. Try to prove me wrong. And this is what I'm actually telling my people who are asking me on the streets what's going to happen. I'm saying, well, we are fighting, but they're going to take us into EU soon, very soon. And so this is the hope is a cure for many, many things. And this is what I want in the narrative, in them, in everything that we are saying, a lot of hope. This is what we need. And this is because this is what I'm spreading, like no matter how bad things are, or like we only like concentrating on how things will be. So with this, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time. And it's always a pleasure to talk to the sanity somewhere on the other side of the world. And I'm grateful to all of you. And talk to you soon.
And always inspiring to hear your hope.
Thank you, Kira.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you again. Okay.